Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leaders Playlist. I'm your host, Renae Craven, and today I am joined by Anita Burke as we review the book Change Isn't Hard by Mel Loy. We hope you enjoy. Hi, Anita. How are you?
Great, thanks, Renee. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. The book we are chatting about today is called Change Isn't Hard, a practical playbook for people-centered change communication by Mel Loy. And we're joined by Mel today. Do you want to introduce Mel for us, please?
I know Mel because we're currently working with a client together. We did maybe cross paths many years ago at another corporate place of employment.
That shall not be named.
And I've also been a long time follower of Mel on LinkedIn, enjoying some of her information that she shares about change. And since working with Mel, I've just been really interested in her very sort of people-centered approach to managing change and practical way of working with people and guiding leaders through change as well. So it was sort of through that I came to know that Mel had a book, and seeing her speak and sharing the book. So decided to bring that to the book club and get Renae involved in reading that as well. So it's been fun to read that over the last little while. So thanks for coming, Mel.
Oh, thank you for having me. I feel very honoured to be selected for book club.
So, Mel, do you want to start by telling us a bit about your experience of writing the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I never thought I'd write a book, to be honest, but since consulting and going out on my own, starting my own business, it's given me the freedom to create a lot more in terms of coming up with my own ideas and own frameworks. I find that being in-house is a great starting point for a comms career, and there's a lot of opportunity in it. But for me, I did find it's a little bit stifling. It's harder to be creative in an in-house role where there's so many pressures around you and, so many ways of working that are set in stone. Whereas as a consultant, you've got so much more freedom to be creative. So as I started to, really develop out this idea around change communication, I realized there wasn't a lot out there. There's a lot on change management. There's a lot on internal comms, but neither of those really delved into what is change communication? How do you do it? And so I'd come up with a bit of a framework that I was using when I was working with clients, and it seemed to resonate really well. Started to develop a whole lot of assets to go along with that and refine them as I use them with different clients. And that's when I kind of went, there's a gap there. Why not fill it? So that's kind of how it started. So I was lucky in a way. I had some time to kill. I was in hospital after some unforeseen surgery and bored. And I'd sort of done the outline for the book. And so I thought, oh, well, I may as well just get started. So I asked my husband to bring my laptop up and off I went. And yeah, it kind of just went from there. So it's self-publishing was an interesting journey in terms of just learning from other people. I really watched what other people were doing, tapped a lot of people on the shoulder and had a coffee with them and got them to tell me how they did it. And the reason I chose that path was twofold. One, a lot more flexibility in what you do and how you do it. There's, you're not trying to fit into somebody else's sort of brand, I guess, as a publisher. But also it was interesting when I had a couple of conversations with publishers, they just focused on my social media presence. And so they're like, oh, well, you haven't got enough followers. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you want me to do your marketing for you. What exactly do you bring to the table other than distribution? So yeah, that's been fun too, actually, just learning that whole process of how do you actually create a book as a tangible thing that then people can buy. So yeah, it's been fun.
Awesome. And I want to get into a little bit of the book and some of the conversations that we had as we were chatting in our regular book clubs. In chapter 3, you talk about how to build trust through org change processes and that need for really clear and fast and accurate information. But in those early days of org change, often you don't know a lot. There's not a lot of accurate information around. It's all sort of a little bit fluffy and unknown. So how do you know what to share in those early days particularly, and how you build that trust and maintain that trust when you can't always provide a lot of accurate information?
It's a really good question. And I've been in this position so many times, unfortunately, over the years. Unfortunately, I've worked on a lot of restructures. I use a model called the three T's of trust. So timely, transparent, and thoughtful. So if you have those principles, it doesn't matter what communication you're doing, really, whether it's change or just anything else. If your communication is timely, if it's transparent, and if it's thoughtful in terms of it's empathetic, it is tailored to the people that you're talking to, that's how you build trust. And being transparent, obviously, is transparent within boundaries. Now, in a restructure, we can't always say a lot because of IR considerations, but it's being transparent with what you can say and what you can't say. It is okay to say, I don't know. I will find out, and we will all find out together, but we don't know. And I think the other thing is too, don't try and pretend it's not happening. You know, restructures are the worst kept secrets in any organization.
Mm-hmm.
We all know it's coming. So stop trying to pretend it's not happening. Acknowledge the elephant in the room. That's part of being transparent. It's when you try and hide things that you lose trust. People see right through it. It's that secret squirrel, you know, kind of conversations that are happening. And that does nothing for anybody. It certainly doesn't start the restructure off on the right foot. It actually sets it up it makes that uphill climb even steeper and harder when you're coming from that base. So yeah, from the get-go, if you can, you know, stick to those three T's of trust, you'll be in a better position.
So as you know, Anita and I and yourself work in agile environments. And in my career, I've come across many change managers who are used to kind of working more in a traditional environment or a waterfall environment where the change plans are defined upfront. And then it's kind of, they've got their order or their process of doing something, and this is how you communicate change, or this is how you do a change. But in an agile environment, we just kind of iterate. We do a little bit, and then, plans shifted a little bit because of the feedback we received. So we're doing this now, or we're doing things in a different order, or whatever it might be. What advice do you have for change managers working in an agile environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just having this conversation this morning with a client. I'm helping to set up a framework for their OCM team, actually. And, you know, we live in a world now where change has never been as frequent. It will never be this slow again. It's never been as big and transformative as we're seeing, and that is the new normal. So those older models that I think you're referring to, like ADCAR, for example, it's quite an old school model in terms of change management. It's quite cumbersome in a world where we don't have that time anymore. We don't have that time to fill out all those, you know, beautiful tools and templates that they provide for you. And, you know, it doesn't work that way. So as a change manager, I think there's two key things you need to have. One is adaptability. So you need to be able to go, you know, we don't need the massive change plan, but we need to know where the impacts are. We need to know what's happening and when, but nobody else is reading that plan but you. I guarantee it. Nobody else is reading it. So think about who the audience is for that plan. And you've got to be much more adaptable in sort of tailoring it for that audience. The other key thing is relationships. The best change managers I've worked with have worked really hard to build relationships with everybody else in the project team as well as their stakeholders. And where I've seen change fall apart in insular environments, you know, within the team, it's been because the change manager just hasn't built relationships. They can't get stuff done. So for me, those are kind of the two key skills. And when it comes to change communication, it's kind of falls off that as well. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach in your planning. The piece of work I'm working on, or that Anita and I are both involved in different ways, you can't plan this change 12 months in advance. You can't plan it a quarter in advance. We are literally doing 2-week sprints in an agile environment. That means my comms plan is updated every 2 weeks because nothing is set in stone. Everything shifts. So don't get disappointed. You're not going to be able to plan out as far in advance as you'd like to. It's just not going to happen. You've just got to, again, come back to, all right, well, what do we know is happening in the next 2 weeks? Let's plan for that. And that is the way change is going now. We do not have the luxury of so much time to be able to plan.
Yeah, funny that we need our change managers and change people to adapt to change.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
As we
exactly.
go.
Even change is changing. Yep.
That's right. So another one within the book in chapter 5, you talk to a key messages spectrum, which I think
Mm,
goes from facts to positioning to fluff.
yes.
And you talk to positioning not meaning that corporate spin. So
Mm.
how do you avoid that positioning becoming spin? Because for someone like me, it all kind of sounds the same.
Yeah, for sure. I have a pet hate of jargon. I heard it termed as jargon monoxide. I was like, yes, jargon monoxide poisoning. I see that all the time. And it's really about it's putting it in the language of your audience. Like, what are we doing and why are we doing it? That's what positioning is. The why is so important. So, yes, okay, we're going through a restructure, but that's because of these things, because we want to achieve these things. But saying that in a way that is genuine and authentic. I don't know about you, but I've never been inspired by, I don't know, a purpose of this change is to optimize customer outcomes. Like, oh God, like what does that do for anyone? So, what is it? What is it that's going to inspire people and put it in words that make sense, that sound like a human? We are talking to humans, not robots. And we've got to get away from this corporate speak. I think it's become a habit for a lot of people. It's not intentional. People don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to be intentionally corporate and vague today. I think it's just we've gotten into these bad habits of using that language, forgetting that people see right through it, that it is confusing, that it can be patronizing, and it, doesn't actually reach the heart of the people that you're trying to reach. So it really is, let's put those facts in a case for why, but in language that is genuine and authentic.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people get to work in a work environment and change how they speak.
Yes,
They don't just talk the same way that they talk at home to
that's
their
it.
family and explain what's going on at work. There's
Yeah,
this whole sort of mask persona that
that's
goes
it.
on.
Yeah, I call it the barbecue chat. Like if you were explaining this to
Yeah.
somebody you've just met at a barbecue and they had no idea what you do and how your organization works, how would you explain it to them? And that's the language you need to be using.
Yeah.
I have a skill that I've developed over the year. Then people ask me to, I call it my wank filter.
I love it.
When can you put your wank filter over this, please, Renae? I'm like, sure, no
Sure.
worries.
But this is the thing, right? Like everyone's got a BS radar, and that's what it comes across as. But also, you have tools now like ChatGPT and Google Gemini. If you're struggling with that language, if it's appropriate to do so, put those sentences, those key messages into that, and say, rewrite this in plain English for me, and see what
I
comes
love
back.
that.
Just see what comes back. And sometimes that's enough to go, oh yeah, it could just say it this way instead of this way. I did hear though on the AI side, I was talking to somebody at an event on Wednesday night, and her 14-year-old daughter was saying, so I get ChatGPT to write this to me. And then I take it and put it through another app, which is called a humanizing app. And it makes what comes out of ChatGPT sound more like it was written by a human. Then I put it in another app, which then scores how much this sounds like it's come from AI. I was like, whoa, okay. This is taking it to a whole new level I didn't know existed, but teenagers do. But again, to a degree, there's no excuse for using this corporate language anymore. There's absolutely no excuse.
Speaking of plain English, your book, the language that you use in your book is very direct, plain English, using words like fluff and hedging and words like that were like, oh yeah, I know what she means. I didn't have to go, what do you think she means by that, Anita? No, it was very easy to read, very easy to understand the intent or the message that you were trying to get across.
Well, thank you. That was the aim.
Good. So as consultants, we, especially Anita and I, in an agile environment, we're often pulled into engagements on client sites at the last possible moment when stuff is on fire or they're at the critical end and they need these agile coaches to go in and make this delivery happen on a certain date or whatever it is. Speaking of my own experience, often I go in and there is no change manager, or there has been one right at the start and then there hasn't been one for a long time, or it just hasn't happened. How do you go into an what advice do you have for us, I guess, going into one of those environments when no change or communications has happened and you're at the tail end of something? What's the minimum that we can do to catch up?
It's a really good question. And I think it would be very specific to wherever you are. But I think the first thing is to ask questions and ask questions of a variety of stakeholders. How well do you think this is going? And you need to kind of get a mandate to be able to go and try and, I guess, put some things in place that will help alleviate it. When you start asking questions like of leaders, how well do you think this is going? And they're like, yeah, not great. Okay. So what do you need to fix it? That's when we can start to get a bit of leverage as well. And especially then if you're asking the end users, like, how well do you think this is going? They're going, it's not great. Okay, so you've got some more evidence to take up the chain. So I'd start with asking questions, just getting a litmus test. But I think at the end of the day, when you come in that late, after you've asked some questions, after you've gotten to lay of the land and started to build some relationships, the biggest thing or the most impactful thing you can do is at least tailor your approach to whoever you're talking to. You may not have all the change plans, all the answers, all that sort of stuff, but if you can at least understand where some of these impacts are going to be, you can at least tailor to some of those impacts. And it won't be perfect. To be honest, no change ever is. It doesn't matter how well you plan it. It's never going to be perfect because there are humans involved. Mm-hmm. But I would just think about how can I tailor this so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And even if it's just, you've got 3 key audiences that you need to meet, they're the 3 that you focus on. I think there's a great saying, it was it's Chip Heath's book, I think, called Switch. And he talks through this story of a guy who I think he was over in Vietnam or Cambodia, and he was trying to help children's nutrition. He was part of Save the Children. But of course, you can't, with very limited resources, that's really hard to do. And he has this saying, true but useless. So, there's all these systemic issues why children's nutrition was so poor. True, but useless given the time and the resources that you have available. So, yes, CEOs doing this, there's all this stuff over here. True, but useless. What is true but helpful that you can change? And they're often the little things, but they're the things that you have control over.
Great book.
Great book. Love that book. I guess I have a question for you. What did you find most valuable out of the book?
I think it's like Renae said, it's that it's easy to read and digest. And I think there's a section at the back, isn't there, that's a table format, which I find is that easy reference.
Yeah.
Now that I've read the entire book, I can just look at that little table at the back and it's sort of that quick reminder.
Makes sense.
To reference parts of the book if I need to get into more detail, but just being able to look at that last bit at the end, remind myself about each step in that epic framework. That last chapter for me is the really useful bit.
That's good to know because I'm writing a second book at the moment, so thank you.
Yeah, do that again.
Yeah, like I said before, it's the simple language, but I also like some of your visuals. So the model for prioritizing your communication, you can see, I did my little love heart on it.
That's really useful feedback. Thank you. It's funny you say that about the illustrations because my brother goes, I read your book. It was good. Didn't really rate your illustrations though. I'm like, no, thanks.
Get him to do them next time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, you do it then.
See how good you are.
Yeah.
Who is the target audience for this book, Mel? Who did you write it for?
I wrote it for internal communicators, change managers, and project managers primarily. I think, as I say in the book, there's this big misunderstanding that if you can do change, you can do comms and vice versa. And if you can do internal comms, you can do change comms and vice versa. And they're all very different skill sets. I've definitely found the people that I find are getting the most value out of it, who are reaching out to me a lot, are change managers. Who often get thrown the comms. Guess what? You're doing the comms as well. And people who are in comms who have been put on a change project for the first time, they're finding a lot of value in it as well. So, yeah. But honestly, I think if you're a team leader or you run a small business, it should be useful for you as well, because we deal with change every day, whether it's with our clients or our own teams, and the same principles will apply.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's not just down to the change manager or the comms people to do the change management. Everybody's involved.
That's it. You can't be everywhere at once either. And that's part of what I'm helping this Canadian client with at the moment. Is they have an OCM team, but it's a big organization. They're going through a lot of change and they can't do everything. It's just as simple as that. So we're coming up with a tiered framework. So there's like a DIY kind of option, that kind of half and half, and then where they actually focus their energy. And that DIY is really about, here's the tools, but also building the capability at the team manager level so that they can manage this stuff well within their own teams.
Yeah, I was going to say leadership could do with reading this book as well.
Yes, that's true. There's a whole section in there on leadership. So,
yeah, just learn how to
just send that
human.
chapter. Yeah, just be a human.
Mel, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast. It's been awesome talking to you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Till next book, Anita.
Yeah, thanks.